All right, with ongoing geopolitical tensions around the world and the Republican Party set to assume control of the federal government in January, the defense sector set to potentially be a winner in 2025, which is a few minutes left till the closing bell on Wall Street. We're looking at how to play defense stocks with the Yahoo Finance Playbook. Joining us now, Tony Bancroft is back with us, Gabelli Funds portfolio manager of Aerospace and Defense. Tony, it's great to see you. So let's look at the big picture here, first of all, because it's a little bit confusing for lay people, perhaps, who are not as steeped in defense as you are. We've got an incoming administration that, maybe will be sort of robust on the military, but on the flip side, wants to cut spending and also wants to perhaps pull the U.S. back from some of the big conflicts in the world. So how are you thinking about those big issues?
Yeah, it's great to be here, Julie. I'd say overall, the U.S. And the new administration probably still wants to be, wants to retain its stature as the world superpower, and it sees China as the near peer threat, right? Sort of the upcoming threat, and there's going to be a push to pivot back to the Pacific, and the only way we really can do that is we really need to rebuild our defense base. The Pacific's much larger. It needs longer range weapon systems, longer range aircraft, more ships, more submarines. And I think the new administration realizes that. And I know that there's been a lot of discussion with the DOGE and cutting costs, federal spending. But I think, the industry is a relatively an oligopoly. There's some major large primes. And I don't think they want to go through sort of what Boeing has been through in its defense business, where it had some essentially negotiation failures with the federal government in some of their defense contracts. And the industry has explicitly said that, where they're not going to get caught probably in that situation again. So I think there's going to be definitely friction, and there's going to be negotiations on both sides. But I think the defense industry will probably do well in the long run. There's going to be a need for more spending. I mean, as you're seeing, there's a lot of geopolitical tension right now, and I don't think that's ending anytime soon. And on top of that, defense spending is still at a relative historic low in post-World War II spending, where historically it's been about 6% of GDP, and right now it's only about 3.5% of GDP. And on top of that, NATO is still not spending at its 2% of GDP target. So that's another $44 billion of spending increase that we could see. So I think that's sort of where we're looking, and that's why our fund, the Gabelli Commercial Aerospace and Defense GCAD, ticker ETF, looks to invest in this area.
Tony, let's dig into some names in the area too. You mentioned Boeing. I mean, it's been a wild year, Tony. The stock's down about 45%, year to date. But if I recall, Tony, you're a fan of that name, correct?
Yes, Josh. I it's one of our largest holdings in our fund, and it's essentially a turnaround story. I think most of the bad news of what's happened in the year, starting in January with the door plug, and all the way up to the strike that just ended, about 2 weeks ago with a negotiation. New contract negotiation. I think that is sort of behind us, and now you see CEO Orford, having an all hands on deck meeting yesterday, and essentially telling the Boeing team that they got to start moving forward, and they can make some big changes here that will make a big impact. And it's not going to be one silver bullet. It's going to take time to recover from what they've been through, but let's look at the numbers here. There's essentially 45,000 plane demand for delivery over the next 20 years. It's a duopoly. There's Airbus and Boeing, and they essentially have about a 10-year backlog with growing demand that actually grew in the worst cycle of downturn in air travel in the history of the industry with COVID. And you still see, customers that lost orders and have been delayed orders, still making orders with Boeing. So I think in the long run, Boeing will get back to profitability, and we'll see them flying high.
Given that you are positive on the space broadly, I was surprised as I was looking through some of your picks that you think are well positioned by what wasn't on the list. Big government contractors like Northrop Grumman or Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, not on the list. And I'm curious why, Tony.
Actually, we like those as well. I was sort of trying to give you some of our largest positions,
Gotcha.
Larger positions, and maybe companies that we see catalysts. For example, obviously Honeywell, which is a larger, is a larger defense contractor and commercial aerospace provider. We see activist Elliott Management stepping in and taking a $5 billion position and saying, hey, this doesn't make sense having these two, this aerospace business and this automation, these automation strategy together. There's not a lot of overlap, and we see that something like a GE, which they've just pulled off and have had wild success from that. We see potential for this to be the case. So companies like that, obviously companies like Textron, where they have the contract for the largest aerospace defense contract after the F-35 to rebuild essentially the replacement for the Black Hawk helicopter, which essentially just doesn't have the legs to operate in the Pacific as the U.S. looks to head that way. And other companies that we like L3Harris, which is a prime, but great exposure to where the growth in the defense budget is going to be in ISR, space, hypersonics, undersea. They've got a lot of opportunities and advantages where they operate in that space. And then going back to some of the smaller companies that we see financial engineering and M&A potential, companies like Triumph, which has been reported, has been speculated that they're looking for a buyer, amongst others. So there's a lot of opportunities in the space, and we have a positive view in the long term.
Tony, always appreciate your time in those stock picks. Thanks for coming on.
Great. Thanks so much.